All right, let's talk about AI governance. Now, I know what you might be thinking. A big, dusty binder full of rules, right? Well, forget that. Today, we're going to build a living, breathing framework from scratch. This is your blueprint for turning AI into a real force for good inside your organization.
And really, it all boils down to this one question. I mean, we all know AI is incredibly powerful, and it's getting more powerful every single day. But if we don't have clear guardrails, that power can easily go off the rails. So, for any leader out there, the most urgent task right now is figuring this out. Who's actually in control?
So how do we even begin to get a handle on something this big? Well, we're going to tackle it by building a framework, and I want you to think of it like a pyramid. We're going to build it together, layer by layer, starting with a really solid foundation and working our way all the way to the top, to the purpose that holds the whole thing together.
Okay, let's dive in, starting right at the bottom. You know, every strong pyramid needs a super solid base, right? For us, that base is the governance blueprint. We're talking about the practical, real-world structures that are going to support everything else we build. This is where we stop just talking about ideas and actually start taking action.
And this foundation really rests on three core pillars. First, you need a central command center. We'll call it the AI Governance Council. Second, you gotta have shared goals to make sure everyone is pulling in the same direction. And third, communication protocols are key because you can't have important info getting stuck in silos. So let's zoom in on that council for a second.
So what does a good governance council actually look like? Well, first off, this is not just another boring committee. It needs to be a small, focused team, think 6 to 8 people, and they have to represent the whole organization. Tech, legal, ethics, the business side, you name it. But here's the absolute game changer. It must have executive sponsorship. Seriously, without that top-level backing, the council has no teeth. It just becomes a box-ticking exercise.
And to make sure everyone's roles are crystal clear, a tool like a RACI matrix is, well, it's a lifesaver. It just spells out exactly who is responsible for doing the work, who is accountable for the final result, who needs to be consulted, and who just needs to be kept informed. It sounds simple, but trust me, a chart like this can save you from so many headaches and delays later on.
Okay, so we've got our structure, our blueprint, but think about it. A blueprint is just paper if the people building the thing don't believe in the vision, right? And that brings us to the next critical layer of our pyramid, what we'll call the culture operating system. This is the engine that really powers the whole blueprint.
Yeah, this quote really nails it. Here's a great way to think about it. Your governance policies, they're like apps on your phone. And those apps can only run on the right operating system. In this case, your company culture is the operating system. It's the underlying code that determines whether those policies actually work, you know, how people behave day to day.
And let's be clear, not all cultures are built the same. You've kind of got two paths you can go down. On one side, you have this compliance-driven culture. This is where governance feels like a chore, a burden, just another box to tick to keep the lawyers happy. But on the other side, you have a value-driven culture. This is where governance is seen as a huge competitive advantage, a way to build real trust and bake ethics right into the DNA of your innovation.
All right, so with a solid structure and a healthy culture in place, we're ready to climb to the next level of the pyramid. And this one is one of the trickiest challenges in all of AI governance, transparency. It's all about finding that perfect balance between being open and, protecting your intellectual property.
The key thing to get here is that transparency is not a one-size-fits-all deal. It just can't be. The level of transparency you provide has to match the level of risk. So for something low risk, like a product recommendation engine, a basic heads up that AI is being used is probably fine. But for something high risk, like an algorithm that approves or denies loans, oh yeah, that demands some serious, deep dive explanations of its logic, its data, and its fairness.
And it's not just about risk, it's also about who you're talking to. Your audience completely changes what transparency means. Your end users, they need simple, plain language explanations. Regulators, on the other hand, they're going to want to see the detailed technical docs and impact assessments. And your own developers, they need the keys to the kingdom, full access to how the model works. You've got to tailor the message for each one.
And here we are. We've made it to the very top of our pyramid. We've built the structure, we've established the culture, we've committed to transparency. But what's the point of it all? What guides it? This final piece, the apex, is the purpose. It's what gives the entire framework meaning.
This brings us to a really interesting idea called spiritual intelligence, or SQ. And look, let's be clear, this has nothing to do with religion. Think of it as a leadership framework that's all about purpose.
It's about a leader's ability to ask the deeper why questions and to make sure technology is aligned with fundamental human values like well-being and trust.
And what SQ does is it completely reframes the central question. A leader operating from this place doesn't just ask, are we legally compliant? That's the baseline. They ask, does this thing we're building actually serve our mission? Does it reflect who we say we are? That simple shift changes everything. Governance stops being a burden and becomes a way to express your company's deepest purpose.
So what's the real-world impact of leading this way? Well, it naturally enhances empathy. You start thinking much more deeply about how your AI affects real people. It encourages humility, that ability to say, hey, we don't have all the answers, and this thing could make mistakes. And ultimately, it drives a long-term vision. You start focusing on building lasting trust, not just hitting the next quarterly target.
Let's make this super concrete. If you're using AI for something as high stakes as credit scoring, this SQ approach means you insist on giving clear, empathetic explanations to people who are denied a loan. If you're using hiring algorithms, it means you don't just do a fairness audit. You publish the results for the world to see. It's about putting human dignity right at the center of every single tech decision you make.
And just like that, our pyramid is complete. It all comes together, right? You have the solid structure at the base, powered by a value-driven culture, which enables smart transparency, and the whole thing is guided by a deep sense of purpose. You put all those pieces together, and that is the formula for truly responsible innovation.
So, we'll leave you with one final thought to chew on. Every single day, your AI systems are learning, adapting, and evolving at a mind-boggling speed. The real question is, are you?